If you've followed stock car racing for any length of time, you know that horsepower has always been one of those hot-button topics that gets fans, drivers, and teams all fired up. Well, buckle up, because starting in 2026, NASCAR is making a change that's been debated, discussed, and demanded for quite a while now. They're bumping up the horsepower from 670 horses to a solid 750 at every track under a mile and a half. That includes your short tracks, your road courses, places like Darlington and Nashville. Basically anywhere that isn't one of those big intermediate speedways is about to get a serious power injection. Now, before you think this is just NASCAR randomly deciding to flip a switch and make the cars faster, let me walk you through why this isn't as simple as it sounds and why it's taken so long to get here. Steve O'Donnell, who's now the president of NASCAR, recently sat down for an in-depth conversation about this change, and what he revealed gives us a fascinating look behind the curtain at how modern NASCAR actually operates. This isn't the old days where Bill France Jr. could walk into a room and just declare what's happening. The sport has evolved into something much more collaborative and, honestly, much more complicated than most fans realize. First off, let's talk about why 750 horsepower specifically. Why not go all the way to 800? Why not push it to 1,000 and really let these machines scream? Well, it all comes down to money. NASCAR looked at the numbers and realized that if they went beyond 750 horses, they'd be looking at somewhere between $40 to $50 million in additional cost across the entire industry. That's not pocket change, and it's not just NASCAR footing that bill. The cost would get spread across all the teams, manufacturers, and it ripples through the entire ecosystem of the sport. Here's where it gets interesting, though. NASCAR isn't just thinking about next season or the season after that. They're looking 3, 4, and 5 years down the road. They've got Dodge coming back into the sport. They've potentially got Honda sniffing around. And their current partners, Toyota, Chevrolet, and Ford, they're all saying the same thing. They don't want to make a change to the engines unless NASCAR is committed to sticking with it for a meaningful period of time. Can you imagine being a manufacturer and investing tens of millions of dollars into a new engine program only to have NASCAR turn around 2 years later and say, "Just kidding, we're changing everything again"? That would be a nightmare and would probably scare off any new manufacturers thinking about joining the series. So NASCAR is being strategic here. 750 horsepower is the sweet spot where they can increase the power without completely overhauling the entire industry. They can make this change work with the current engine architecture, and it gives them a stable platform for when a new manufacturer wants to come in and potentially introduce a completely new engine design down the road. That's a 3-year runway they're talking about. 3 years to develop, test, and implement a new engine architecture that could be anything from what you see on the street to something completely purpose-built for racing. The manufacturers want that flexibility, and NASCAR is giving it to them by not locking everyone into an unsustainable power figure right now. But horsepower doesn't exist in a vacuum. You can't just bolt on more powerful engines and call it a day. Everything has to work together. The aerodynamics of the car, the braking systems, the tires. It has to all be matched up properly, or you're going to have a dangerous mess on your hands. That's why NASCAR is planning a test session at North Wilkesboro, probably sometime in early December after the season wraps up. They're bringing in drivers, crew chiefs, representatives from all 3 manufacturers, and they're going to try some things. They're going to experiment with different aerodynamic packages, see how the tires handle the extra power, and basically use that test as a laboratory to figure out what works and what doesn't. This is actually pretty cool because NASCAR is being smart about this. They're not just dictating from on high what the package is going to be. They've got a driver council with guys like Christopher Bell and Joey Logano who are going to be involved in the testing process. These are the guys who actually have to wheel these cars at the limit, so their input matters. They're working alongside the smartest engineers in the sport, the people from the race teams who spend every waking hour trying to find speed. If you combine the knowledge of the drivers with the technical expertise of the teams and the resources of the manufacturers, you've got a pretty good recipe for coming up with something that might actually improve the racing. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the next-gen car. This is NASCAR's baby, the car they spent years developing, the car that was supposed to solve so many problems in the sport. And in some ways it has. The intermediate track racing has been absolutely spectacular. We've seen incredible battles, photo finishes, and the kind of racing that has people on the edge of their seats. But the short track racing, that's been a challenge. Road courses have had their moments, but they've also had some head-scratchers. The car is incredibly advanced technologically. It's got independent rear suspension, sequential gearboxes, carbon fiber components, all this cutting-edge stuff that makes it a marvel of engineering when you stand next to it in the garage. But here's the thing, and this is something that really resonates with old-school racing fans. The next-gen car almost feels too advanced for what NASCAR racing has been traditionally all about. NASCAR has always had this identity as a sport with physicality, with cars that were tough to drive, that required real muscle and skill to wrestle around a track for 3 or 4 hours. The technology in these current cars is incredible, but it's also expensive, and it's changed the character of the racing in ways that not everyone loves. When you look at the cost of these cars, all the specialized parts and pieces, and then you think about sending one of these technological marvels out to beat and bang at a place like Martinsville, there's a bit of a disconnect there. One thing that's really important to understand is that NASCAR today operates much differently than it did 20 or 30 years ago. It's a collaborative process now. When NASCAR wants to make a change, they're sitting down with team owners, with drivers, with manufacturers, and they're having conversations. They're attempting to build consensus, which takes time. It's frustrating for fans who just want to see immediate action, but it's the reality of running a major professional sport in the modern era. You can't just snap your fingers and change everything overnight, not when there are millions and millions of dollars at stake and multiple constituencies that have to all be considered. The timing of this horsepower announcement is interesting as well. NASCAR is also in the middle of figuring out what to do with the playoff format. There's been a lot of talk about potentially expanding the championship round from one race to multiple races. The single race championship format has been controversial. Sure, it's dramatic, and it creates incredible tension, but it's also led to some situations where the driver who had the best season doesn't win the championship because of one bad race or one piece of bad luck. Drivers like Christopher Bell have been vocal about their concerns. If you win 10 races in a season but get taken out by a couple of other drivers in the championship race, are you really not the champion? Which is a tough pill to swallow. NASCAR is also dealing with the reality of its racing facilities. Unlike other major sports, NASCAR tracks don't get the same tax breaks and public funding that stadium and arenas do for other sports. If a track wants to upgrade the press box, install a new video board, or renovate the grandstands, that's all coming out of pocket for the track owner. This puts NASCAR at a disadvantage when it comes to keeping up with the fan experience at other sporting events. The gap between what you experience at a NASCAR race versus what you experience at an NFL game or an NBA game has grown over the years, and a lot of that comes down to facilities and infrastructure. The tracks that NASCAR and other entities own are viewed as single-purpose venues, just racetracks rather than multi-use entertainment facilities. That limits what you can do with them and how you can generate revenue. There was an opportunity in recent legislation to change this, to give NASCAR tracks the same treatment as other sporting venues, but it didn't happen, so NASCAR is working with what they have. So what do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any updates as we continue to follow this story.